Hello and welcome once again to this special series on News Unlocked this week, Eco Shock 2020, when in a week where the GDP figures have substantially contracted to a new low, we are looking at the state of the economy through various dimensions. Today we are going to focus on an issue that concerns millions of Indians, jobs, the job crisis that confronts this country. Already, according to the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, 1.8 crore Indians have lost their jobs since the pandemic in April. How bad is the situation on the ground? Remember, millions of Indians have been forced to also take salary cuts since the pandemic began in April. Our focus today is on the big crisis of Naukri or jobs. Take a look.
Businesses shutting down, shooting unemployment rate, and nosediving GDP. The Indian economy is in doldrums, and some experts are already saying that the economy is in recession. According to data released by Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, salaried jobs have taken the biggest sustained hit in the COVID-19 induced lockdown. CMI data shows 17.7 million salaried jobs lost in April 2020, and another 0.1 million jobs lost in the month of May. While 3.9 million jobs were gained back in June, an additional 5 million jobs were lost in July.
The last 2 months have been better than what was happening 4 months ago, 3 months ago. But it's a small improvement over a couple of months. Over 5 years, the trend is a downward trend, and we need very serious professional input to reverse this, and it is entirely possible to reverse this. We need determination and skill.
What is more worrying is the fact that despite the central government allowing most economic activities to resume after stringent lockdowns, the overall joblessness has worsened in the month of August in the formal sector.
Whenever we look at jobs, we have to look at not just in terms of the quantity, but in terms of the quality as well. It is in this context, it is important to consider the backdrop with which we went into this particular crisis. While in other sectors of the economy, there was basically, for instance, take the banking sector. Compared to other economies, we went into this crisis actually in an inferior position on the banking sector. But on employment, what is important is that, and this is something that we highlighted very clearly in the economic survey as well, over the last 6 years, the quality of jobs had improved significantly.
As per the latest data released by CMI, the figure for urban unemployment in India shot up to 9.83% in August, as against 9.15% in July. And rural unemployment too witnessed an increase. It was 7.65% in August, as against 6.66% recorded in July. According to CMI data, Haryana is the worst hit state with 33.5% unemployment rate in August, followed by Tripura at 27.9% and Rajasthan at 17.5%. Karnataka reported the lowest unemployment rate at 0.5%, followed by Odisha at 1.4% and Gujarat at 1.9%. Some businesses have been hit especially hard by the global and domestic lockdowns, primarily firms in the service sector, working in travel, aviation and hospitality. Manufacturing is also another sector that is struggling to cope with the times.
And to make sense of those numbers, I'm joined by a special guest. Joining me now is Mahesh Vyas of the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. Appreciate your joining us, Mr. Vyas. We spoke to you about a month ago, and you then seemed to suggest that there was some improvement in the unemployment numbers. The worst phase had been April, May. Now, when you look at the August numbers, overall unemployment 8.35%, urban unemployment 9.83%, rural unemployment 7.65%. How do you see the situation? Is there any sign of jobs being created at all?
So there was a rapid improvement in the months of May and June, and then we saw some fatigue set in. That came in the month of July when the improvement slowed down. And what we see in August is, in a sense, a kind of a deterioration because there is no improvement in August. So a deterioration in the sense that in the last 3 months, we have been seeing improvements, initially dramatic improvements, then a slowing down of the improvement. And now we see in the month of August that the unemployment rate has gone up. And that means that not enough jobs were created in August compared to the number of people who joined the labor force. So actually the employment rate, which I think is more important than the unemployment rate, dropped.
Mm-hmm. The reason I'm asking you that is because your CMI figures for July seem to suggest that 50 lakh salaried employees had lost their jobs, 1.8 crores since April. So clearly in the formal sector, salaried employees continue to lose jobs. So it's not just about job creation, but it's also now more increasingly about job losses and salary cuts.
Well, all jobs are important, Rajdeep. So the job of a daily wage laborer is no less important to him or her compared to the job of a salaried class employee. So all jobs are important to the people who have those jobs. What is distressing is from a macroeconomic point of view that those people who are desperate to get jobs have gone and gotten those jobs. Those are the daily wage laborers. But the salaried employees are slowly getting a bigger hit now. So they are facing a slow creeping increase in the number of people unemployed. So in July, we said that 500,000 salaried people lost jobs while others gained jobs. Now we're seeing in August that 2 million salaried jobs were lost in addition to the ones lost last time. Mm-hmm. So last time the count was 18 million salaried jobs lost. Now it goes up to 21 million.
So 21 million is what you're saying. Salaried employees have lost jobs. What I want to understand is effectively the informal sector, daily wage laborers were the ones who suffered the immediate impact of the lockdown. 4 to 5 months down, you're telling me that companies, both in the formal and the MSMEs in an informal sector across the board, there is a sense of people losing jobs. Am I correct?
That's right. So whether it is the MSMEs or the larger companies, the medium and large size companies, there is evidently some laying off that is happening. There is a slow but steady deterioration in the count of salaried employees. So this is being offset by increase in farm jobs. That's because Kharif crop is doing well. But the salary jobs are really getting worse.
Are you seeing any hopeful signs at all, Mahesh Vyas, or are we in for a prolonged period of uncertainty over employment?
I do see uncertainty over a prolonged period. And it's not only because salary jobs are going down. It's because the primary source of job creation in the months of June and July, which was the Kharif crop and the increase in Manrega employment, will soon play itself out. We cannot rely upon a Kharif crop to keep employing us. Finally, this crop will be over. What's going to happen after that? So the story in rural India is already playing itself out. So in August, the stress was more in rural India and less in urban India in terms of where the increase in the stress was. Of course, urban India has larger unemployment rate. But it's the rural India, which is rural parts of India, that is losing jobs. Salary jobs are getting lost as companies are finding it difficult to survive in these difficult conditions. And B, rural jobs are also kind of declining. So I think there is increased uncertainty as we go ahead.
Let me just ask you in conclusion, there were some reports in recent months of a number of the daily wage laborers coming back to work, especially on construction sites. Some element of construction work has restarted, manufacturing has restarted. To that extent, do you see that increasing now over the next few months, that companies will be pushed into trying to get back into a business cycle, and that might to some extent at least provide more job opportunities?
There is some evidence that labor that had gone back to the villages has started coming back. But that's more a sign of serious distress. That even after Manrega has been providing a lot of jobs and the agricultural season has been providing a lot of jobs, labor is not getting sufficient income, wages, or job opportunities, or a combination of the two in rural India to go back, even when the COVID-19 scare hasn't gone off. In fact, it is rising. So actually, this is more to be read as a sign of stress that rural India couldn't take care of the people who went back over there. They are coming back because there is significant stress even in rural India, even after all the efforts that we have seen.
Mahesh Vyas, you've given us a sense of what these numbers really mean. Thank you so much for joining me here on this special on EcoShock 2020. So the news from Mahesh Vyas is disturbing. The job crisis is still with us. Now, amongst those who have been worst affected are women and children. The pandemic has hit them perhaps worse than any other group when it comes to jobs. Let's take a look at the difficulties that many of them are facing, especially women who are engaged in the informal sector, how their small businesses and their jobs are at stake. Aishwarya Paliwal and Gopi Manyar bring you today's other special report on EcoShock 2020.
The world as one knew it has changed. The coronavirus pandemic has brought things to a grinding halt, as most businesses are either shut or struggling to crawl back to normalcy. A personal fitness trainer with 20 years of experience under her belt, Pooja is finding it difficult to get work, as the pandemic has enforced guidelines of social distancing and most people are preferring to stay at home.
We are not expecting anything right now, no income, not at all. Only the expenditures would increase. So people are not very motivated right now. They are not considering their figure. Right now, their priority is only health. So they are coping up with walk and yoga session at home.
According to a recent report by International Labour Organization, while jobs are being lost in every sector, women are underemployed at a higher rate than men, since more women are engaged in sectors related to hospitality and leisure, one of the worst hit because of the pandemic. But even for women with their own businesses, things do not look positive.
So at least 4-5 lakhs a month you need to dish out to run up, like even a business like this.
Sonia runs her own jewellery store in Delhi's Shahpur Jat, and with all the weddings of the recent season being postponed, her business has come to a standstill.
It's because I lost 5 months of business. So 20-25 lakhs I'm down right now. So like even running a business is not easy because you're competing with the men around. And there is a male chauvinist attitude.
Tanya, who used to get a monthly paycheck earlier, is now working on daily wages, as her store owner's business went down crashing in the months of lockdown. While women, like men, are struggling to cope economically during the pandemic, shutting of schools and shift to online means of education has moved children of low-income backgrounds from classrooms to jobs.
काम क्यों करते हो?
घर वालों की मदद करने के लिए.
11-year-old Pawan is now helping his uncle repair chairs. He is the eldest of 3 siblings and used to go to school before the lockdown began. His school has moved online, but Pawan cannot afford to buy a smartphone to resume his classes.
मेरे पास मोबाइल नहीं है, इसीलिए ऑनलाइन पढ़ नहीं सकता हूँ. इससे अच्छा मामा के साथ काम कर लेता हूँ.
With no signs of reopening of schools in near future, children like Pawan continue to be dropped out of the education system and included in the margins of country's informal economy.
And joining us now is Manish Sabarwal of Teamly Services, the country's largest staffing and human capital service company. Appreciate your joining us, Manish. We want to focus on the job crisis in terms of solutions now. We know that since April, since the lockdown, a number of people, millions of people have lost jobs. Give us solutions, Manish, that you think are workable in the present scenario?
Oh, I think that we've known these solutions for a long time. Apprenticeship Act reform was the 20th point in Indira Gandhi's 20-point program in 1975. There are very few people who would disagree that, skill reform. But in broad categories, labor reform, education reform, compliance reform, and banking reform would all be absolutely doable and absolutely urgent, right? So there are three kinds of reform. There's flick of pen reforms, which you can just change a law. There's institutional reforms, and there is capacity building reforms. Now, capacity building reforms take 3 to 5 years. Institutional reforms probably take 2 years. But flick of pen reforms, the simplest, lowest hanging fruit for formal job creation would be compliance reform. We have 67,000 compliances for Indian employers. We have 6,700 filings, and 17,000 of them prescribe jail. One of the most interesting lines in the Vishnu Sahasranam roughly translates to, why did God create fear? So he could take it away. It makes no sense to have 17,000 reasons by which employers can go to jail. So I would say that in 90 days, if you appoint a compliance commission that takes an axe through these compliances, big companies like us, I have 150 guys in regulatory affairs whose full-time job is taking care of this regulatory cholesterol. But small companies can't afford that. So everybody loves MSMEs, but we don't want to give Purna Swaraj to these MSMEs from the labor inspector, from all the compliances. So if we want job creation to really take off in the formal sector, and I have a more subtle point about India's problem not being jobs, it being wages, because our unemployment rate has stayed between 6 and 9% since independence. So we have everybody who wants a job has a job. They don't have the wages they want or the wages they need. So that, if we do compliance reform, that will accelerate formalization. If we do banking reform, India had 97 banks in 1947. We only have 95 banks today. So our credit to GDP ratio of 50% can go to 100%.
But many of Sure, but let me ask you to step back for just a moment, because the sense is that what the lockdown has done is not put the focus as much on job creation as how to cushion job losses. People are facing salary cuts as well as losing jobs. Salaried jobs are being lost, and jobs are being lost in the unorganized sector as well. How do you cushion some of the impact of that, Mr. Sabharwal?
Oh, all policy can do in the short run is to prevent disease from leading to death, from unemployment leading to hunger, and from working capital problems to lead to bankruptcy. I think that in the short run, this notion that we should borrow 10 lakh crores steal from our grandchildren, fiscal and monetary policy, we can't behave like the US. The US is operating the US fiscal deficit this year is more than India's GDP, is $3 trillion. So I would submit that we have to act like a country whose per capita income is $2,500. That's not it's not $50,000. We can't borrow 10 lakh crores and throw it from helicopters and somehow assuage this pain. We have to act like a country. So fiscal policy, our fiscal deficit is already 11 to 12%. In monetary policy, we've brought down interest rates, we've given regulatory forbearance, we've given liquidity. So the only option we have right now is structural reform. So I would submit that this pain is a symptom of pre-existing conditions. So I actually don't think anybody in the country has solutions right now which would say that in the next 10 weeks or 10 days, we can provide some floor. The only thing you can do is a payroll protection program like the US did, which costed them about $600 billion. And we don't have that money. So it's really tragic what's going on with COVID. But India's weakness is also India's strength in this situation. The two labor market shock absorbers of self-employment, which is largely self-exploitation, and agriculture are somehow, balancing the scales where we're not leading to hunger. So I think that there's very little that can be done in the next 60 days, 90 days, but we can change India in the next 3 to 5 if we do all the structural reform it was needed. So Shinzo Abe is just leaving his post. He had 3 arrows: fiscal policy, monetary policy, and structure. We didn't do structure.
So are you in a sense suggesting that COVID-19 provides us an opportunity to look at perhaps those areas where we can use this opportunity to create skilled and semi-skilled jobs, focus on quality of jobs and not just on quantity of jobs?
Absolutely. India has never had a quantity of jobs problem. Since independence, unemployment is stuck between 6 and 9, but our poverty is stuck at 26. So our problem is employed poverty. People have a job, but they're still stuck in poverty. So productivity reforms, COVID gives us a policy window. Political scientist John Kingdon says when the problem, solution, and timing come together. India doesn't change for a better option. She changes when you have no option. Mm-hmm. And the 3 lakh crore less GST, the 3 lakh crore in coming NPAs, and the 25% contraction in GDP offer us no options. So it would be horrible for me to say I've been waiting for something like COVID, but I think that our hand will be forced this time, and we will come out on the other side. China's per capita GDP is 4 times more than us, right? We may be 5th in the world in GDP, but we're 138th in the world in per capita. And in a crisis like COVID, per capita matters more than total GDP.
But let me still ask you this in conclusion. Middle class jobs in particular are being hit. This is the same middle class which is seen to have been the big beneficiary of economic liberalization. But what COVID has done, especially in the services sector, is forced many companies to close down, downsize, and employment has suffered. How do you, in your view, cope up with the psychological impact in a way that that's happening? People losing well-paid jobs. How does one, I come back to it, cushion perhaps the impact? Are you saying that's just not possible, we've got to live with it?
Well, in a country where poverty is as widespread as it is, in a country where fiscal deficit is as big as it is, I'm a little surprised by the outrage at MSMEs or banks or migrant labor. These are pre-existing conditions of the Indian economy. So yes, I think it's really tough, but companies are not ponds, they are rivers. Shareholders don't pay salary, customers do. If customers are forced on strike by a legal lockdown, there is no way MSMEs can pay salaries. So I think absolutely, it's painful, but it's true that in the short run, there's very little policy can do. But in the long run, 2-3 years, we could really transform if we use this opportunity. We absolutely have to show the kind of courage that we've been showing in politics with Article 370 and black money now in economics. We have to do labor reform. We have to do banking reform. We have to finish the education reform. And I think that strategy will really attract global capital. India is one of the few places in the world where, because of our past sins, in the next 2 decades, there's a lot of growth left. And I think so we can set off that super cycle of investment, of skilling, of formalization, if we signal to the world that we're letting go of this regulatory cholesterol. We have finally been honest that this is not working for 400 million people in the labor force. So I unfortunately would believe that this policy window...
So what you're saying is... Yes. Very quickly, what you're saying is use this to formalize parts of the economy that have remained part of this unorganized, informal sector for much too long.
Yes, absolutely. That would be set off a productivity super cycle. The productivity of our individuals, the productivity of our firms, and the productivity of our states is too low. I live in Karnataka. We have 1/4 the number of people of UP, yet we have the same GDP. In between firms, there's a 22 times difference between the top and bottom in manufacturing. And obviously in skilling, there is a huge... Poverty is about productivity. And COVID has really brought it to fore that Indian firms, Indian states, and Indian individuals really differ in their productivity. So we're all in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat.
That's a nice way to put it. We're all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat. Manish Sabarwal, thank you so much for joining me. That's it then on this India Today special Eco Shock 2020 as we cover different aspects of the economic challenges facing the country today. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.
Hello everyone, this is Rahul Kamal here. Hope you enjoyed this video. For the latest news and analysis, like and subscribe the India Today YouTube channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated.